Toss aside the touchy-feely notions of love in business and recognize the real power it holds. Welcome to the Love is Just Damn Good Business podcast with host Steve Farber. Drawing on his work with a wide variety of companies from the Fortune 100 to smaller family-owned businesses, Farber shares inspiring interviews with business leaders and proven strategies for how you can create experiences that your customers will love by developing a culture that your employees, teammates, and colleagues love working in. Discover why and how love, at the end of the day, is just damn good business for you too. Here's your host, Steve Farber.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Love is Just Damn Good Business podcast. I'm your host, Steve Farber. Today, my guest is Hector Fernandez, who's the CEO of Aristocrat Gaming. So Hector is, by background, an accountant. He's a CPA. He's an MBA. But more important, he is an unbelievably great leader, an extreme leader, as we call him around these parts. He's a practitioner of love as a business practice, and this is the way that we actually found each other recently. Is that has been his approach as a leader, and he's done some incredible things at Aristocrat Gaming, which is, we'll just say high level, a company that produces casino games, video-based casino games that appear in casinos all around the world. So it might seem to you that casino business and love in business is a bit of a non sequitur, but I think we'll discover that that it is not, at least not where Hector Fernandez is concerned. So Hector, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Steve. Such a pleasure and joy to be here.
Thank you. The pleasure is mine. So let's start with the lay of the land. Aristocrat Gaming, of which you're the CEO, is part of the company Aristocrat.
Right.
So just give us a high level as to how all that fits together, and then we'll focus in on the gaming aspect of it.
Sure. So our roots are really based in Australia. So the company started off as an Australian-based company, still publicly traded there actually. And started off in the manufacturing of slot products. And for a lot of those that are listening that may not know, Australia is the highest per capita gambler in the world. And so it was obviously a good place to start because Australians really enjoy gaming. And the company itself has been around for over 60 years. And over that period of time has really diversified. So today we really run 3 different business units. We have a business unit that's RMG, or Real Money Gaming. It's a nascent business unit, something we just started at the beginning of this year. We have a second business unit that's digital based. And under that digital umbrella, we make games on your phone, on tablets, on your PC that are anywhere from a social casino game where you can play casino products with coins, not real money, or an adventure game like a raid, which is kind of a more hardcore adventure game that you progress and you spend multiple hours playing that game. And so the company has really looked at the business and said, what is our core competencies? What are our core strengths, our core values? And then taking it from there as it expands into other parts of the business.
So gaming is in terms of percentage of the company, let's say in terms of employees, is it the biggest part of the company?
Yeah, so we have roughly about 7,000 employees globally. The gaming division is just shy of 4,000.
Oh, okay. And you guys are based in, the corporate office is based in Las Vegas?
Yeah, so our corporate, where we're incorporated, is in Sydney, Australia.
Right.
So that is our corporate office. Our corporate headquarters in the US is Las Vegas.
Okay, got you.
I can see the strip from my window.
Yeah, you would have to. I mean, where you couldn't be anywhere else, at least not in the US. All right. So how did you came out of with your MBA background at USC, right?
Yeah. Go Trojans.
When you were in that MBA program and you were thinking ahead to the career that you wanted to carve out for yourself, were you thinking gaming?
Yeah, a great question. If you don't mind, maybe I could even go back a little
Yeah,
bit.
please go
I don't
back
know.
to the day you were born,
Yeah,
and
that's
let's
exactly
start
where I
from
was going
there.
to start. That's
I think
exactly where I
that's a
was going
great
to start.
place. Yeah.
So I was born in Guatemala City, and there is, Guatemala is a beautiful place, but limited opportunities. Obviously, still a third world country, and my parents had decided that in order for us to get ahead in life, that we needed to come to the U.S. And this was, I won't date myself, but back in the '80s. And so I moved to the U.S. when I was about a year old, and we were very poor, like a very typical immigrant family with the big American dream, obviously. And I grew up in East LA, so not the best part of town. And I went to the public school there. And interesting thing, I didn't learn English until I was about 5 years old. So we spoke Spanish at home. My parents didn't speak English. And I learned English at 5. And that was the first time in my life where I realized, hey, I'm different. Because as you showed up at school, or as I showed up at school, I had no idea what anybody else was saying.
Hmm.
And I actually think that's where this concept of love really started with me in my experience. Because what you find is language is a very important communication tool. But when you have that barrier, humans have this ability to transcend language, right? Whether it's social cues or it's even simple things like smiling. And so that's really where that journey started for me. I attended this public school up until about third grade. The principal talked to my mom. And the other interesting thing at that point as well is we served as the translator. So we were not only, imagine that, right? The principal's talking to your parent, but you're translating what the principal says. What gives you a lot of social liberty relative to how well you want to translate the message. But the principal basically talked to my mom and said, hey, look, the reality is it is very difficult. If you want your kids to be successful in life, it is really difficult to do that through the East LA public schools. Not impossible, just very difficult, and more difficult because of what you're surrounded by, other outside influences. And she said, look, I think your kids, are very intelligent and have a lot of potential. And there's this program for underrepresented minorities to attend these very fancy private schools. So I've translated all of that to my mom. And then, she's like, I really think that you should apply. And so my mom did. So I have 2 older sisters and me, and we basically helped my mom fill out this application, and they accepted us. And it was one of the, if you think about pivotal moments in your life, that is a pivotal moment in my life that changed the trajectory of where I am today. And I always tell this about my mom. My mom, she changed generations. Like the decision she made to leave her foreign country, to come to a new country, to the unknown, she changed generations. And so, we were all very excited. And but I did have to take 3 public buses to get there. So
this was tell me again, what grade was this?
4th grade. So it would have been 4th grade.
Okay. So there's one little piece in that so far that I just want to clarify. When you first showed up at school, you didn't speak English.
At kindergarten, yes.
Yeah. And in this 4th grade conversation, you're the translator.
Yes.
So over those first few years, it sounds like you learned English really fast.
Yeah.
Which I guess is not unusual at that age, right?
It's not if you're committed to doing it. So one of the things that my mom did really well is she made us speak English at home as well, right, even though she didn't understand the vast majority of it.
Gotcha. Okay. So now you're in 4th grade. Now you're getting on several public buses to get to school.
Right. And that's when I fell in love with education, because it's easy when you get dropped off at school and you're grumpy and, you walk into class. It's a lot of work to take 3 public buses to get there. And I showed up and I was different. I looked different. I talked different. I dressed different, even though we wore a uniform, but I didn't have fancy shoes. And I realized that I had to work a lot harder, because in the 3rd grade class, I was the #1 student at the public school. in this fourth grade experience, I was the last student in the class.
Right.
I just didn't have the same pedigree. I mean, it's little things like even going home and the words that you hear at home, right? That forms a lot of your vocabulary. I didn't have that, but I would always tell myself my vocabulary is twice as big because I speak two languages. But it was a very humbling experience. And I remember this one episode where I had forgotten my homework, and my mom took 3 public buses to bring my homework. And I had told my teacher, hey, I forgot my homework. And like any fourth grader, she's probably like, you didn't do your homework. And I was like, no, I actually did my homework. I just forgot it. So my mom shows up. She did, obviously there's no cell phones back then, so I didn't know she was coming. And she brings my homework.
Huh.
And my teacher makes me, in front of my entire class, tell her thanks in Spanish. And in fourth grade, all you want to do is fit in. Like, that's the last thing you want to do is be different. That was a very humbling experience for me as well. And it was one of those things that, in those little pivotal moments in your life, you accept, hey, I am different. But can I make this difference a positive thing instead of a negative thing?
Right.
And so that was another really important thing. I struggled in 4th and 5th grade. I was not a stellar student by any stretch of the imagination, but I worked really hard. When I graduated 8th grade, I didn't win, best student, but I won most improved student. And that award probably has meant more to me than anything else I've won since.
Really?
Yeah.
So it seems we kind of take for granted for awards that we give out at that age. We think, oh, it's just a nice thing to do. But it had that kind of an impact that you still see how valuable it was to this day.
It was the first glimpse of, hey, if I work harder, if I commit, if I worry less about what everybody else thinks, I could be the best version of myself. Right. And at the end of the day, people forget that. People are always looking and saying, I want to be that person. Or, we all have role models. I want to be more like that person. What you really should be trying to do is be the best version of yourself, which that award was a physical representation of me being the best version of myself, which, by the way, again, I wasn't the valedictorian of 8th grade. I was the most improved student in middle school.
Right.
And so, fast forward to high school. And so there I was very fortunate. I went to a very prestigious prep school. And I did well there. So I had gotten the footing underneath me. I wasn't the valedictorian, but I knew there was no way I was going to be valedictorian. And all I could do was be the best version of myself. And then I went to Claremont McKenna. I was very fortunate. I found small liberal arts school in California, phenomenal education. I showed up there and I was like, I'm smart. I got into this great school. And again, it's a humbling experience because you're surrounded by National Merit Scholar winners. You're surrounded by valedictorians. You're surrounded by these incredible minds. And all of a sudden, you kind of start from scratch again. And in a weird way, life is a little bit that way, starting from scratch, right? And having the resilience, the tenacity, the ability to, my mom used to say, my mom passed away recently, but she used to tell me, like, the life you've built, you've done it by scratching the dirt with your nails. And she would tell me that in Spanish. And it's still that metaphor. Every time I have like a bad day or something difficult happen, I remember that, like the physical scratching the dirt with your nails, right? And it's really one of the core values and principles that my mom taught me is this tenacity, right? Be willing to work harder than everybody else. Be willing to give it your all. Be willing to fail. And then ultimately love what you do. And that kind of brings it back, right? She had this ability to teach me in these moments, in these very difficult moments, to love and appreciate the things that I had been given. Because even though I didn't have the fancy Jordans, even though, she picked me up in a 1984 Oldsmobile Cutlass Sierra Brown that would break down quite a bit. Unfortunately, always in the pickup line. I had gotten an opportunity that most kids with my background just had never gotten or would never get.
And where did your sisters end up?
So my older sister and I got into that first round of the private schools. So we both went to school in Pasadena. My middle sister, they couldn't take all 3 of us, so she didn't get in that first round. And so She had to keep going to the public school, but my mom didn't give up. My mom kept pursuing it. And I think I can't remember if it was 1 or 2 years later, my middle sister also came to the school with us. So all three of us went to this middle school. And then for high school, they went to an all girls private school and I went to this prep school.
So now that you're all that you're all grown up, all three of you, and you just gave us this beautiful illustration of how that experience and your mother's guidance began to shape your priorities and your values. Did it manifest the same way in your sisters?
It did in different ways. It's so fascinating because people, I think sometimes, particularly in the US, success is viewed through a monetary lens, and money is an element of it. It's actually a smaller element than most people think. So my older sister is a very successful head of HR for they make a grain company in the Pacific Northwest. She is the first female on the executive team, and definitely the first female Latina. She's 5'4", but she's a reckon to deal with, right? And she's just very talented at her job. And she's raised two amazing boys. And then my middle sister stayed home for a big chunk. We all went to college. She stayed home for a big chunk to raise her two kids, and she just recently went back to the workforce. And it's funny because we all have personalities, and I hope Karen, if she hears this, doesn't get mad, but Karen is your typical middle child, right? She's a middle child. I like to say she's a Scorpio, and her name is Karen. And so the funny thing about Karen is anytime you ever need anything done that's hard, where Patty, that's my older sister, and I are like, I don't know, we're not so sure. We're like, hey, Karen, do you want to call this person? They did something, we need your help. And Karen's like, yeah, I'm all over it. And so this concept of happiness and success is different for everybody.
Yeah.
Again, it's not, I think the US and society in a lot of ways measures it financially. But at the end of the day, it's really, have you gone through life? Have you been happy? Have you loved other people? And have you left this a better place?
Right. So when you started into your higher education pursuits, were you one of these kids that always had a clear idea as to what you wanted to do? There's what you want to be, in terms of who you are as a human being, best version of yourself, etc. But there are some kids, they just from a very early age, they know what their career path is going to be, which makes the rest of us look suspect somehow. So I was not one of those kids, by the way. When did it start to become clear to you what you wanted to focus on as far as your higher education pursuits?
So I wanted to be a doctor growing up, and like a very typical immigrant family, you looked at professions like lawyers and doctors as the typical thing that you wanted your kids to do, right? Because it was the American dream.
I thought it was just Jewish mothers that.
No, I think it's all immigrant moms. So I went to Claremont, and I had this vision that I was going to be pre-med. But I had this doctor in high school, and I'll never forget. I don't remember his name. African-American man, and he was a doctor, but he really ran the hospital, and he would only see a handful of patients. And I remember talking to him one time. Said, "Hey, you went to school all this time to be a doctor, and you're kind of not. You're an administrator." And he said, "No, I'm not an administrator, Hector. I make all the decisions. I tell people what to do." And it was in that moment, these little like stories as you look back at your past, right? And I was like, I want to tell people what to do. That sounds like a good plan. And he explained to me, when you're a doctor, particularly as health insurance rolled out in the US, it became a very different business, and you lost a lot of autonomy. And he had actually he'd gone through med school, he'd been a practicing doctor, and then he'd gone back and gotten his MBA. And in his MBA is how he had made the career transition. He still saw a handful of patients, but he ran the hospital. And so, it's in that moment when I went to college, I was like, well, I still want to be a doctor, but maybe I want to be more of an administrator. And I took my first econ class, and I just fell in love with it. And I was like, this is what I was destined to do. I was destined to be an econ major. And then I took my first accounting class, and my accounting professor, Professor Massoud at Claremont McKenna, said, Hector, if you want to be successful in business, you have to know the language of business. which really resonated with me because remember, I didn't know the English language
Right.
when I went to school. So I was like, well, I want to know the language of business. And so that's how I minored in accounting. And he said, you can always make a pivot back into a business person, but you really should start your career in public accounting because that's where you'll really understand the nuts and bolts how a business is run. And you get visibility to lots of different industries and lots of different companies. And so that's what I did. To answer your question, it's been a journey. I've not ever known exactly what I wanted to do for a living, but I've always listened. And I think that there's a lot of executives out there that have lost the ability to listen because they believe that they have all the answers. The most honest thing, the thing that will lead you to success is when you say, I actually don't know the answer. And I'm going to listen and we're going to debate it. And I'm going to surround myself with people that are a lot smarter. Remember, my whole life, I've been surrounded with people that are a lot smarter than me. And that's okay. It's actually a phenomenal thing. And it's one of the principles that we have implemented here as we've built out the team is hire people that are smarter, hire people that are more competent, hire people that have that experience, and then listen.
So the advice for listening to others' ideas and listening to people who are smarter than you is, it's not conventional practice, but it is conventional wisdom. What's interesting is that you used that in reference to yourself, to your own path is how that strikes me. It's like there's a lot of us, if we're not really clear on what our direction is or what our purpose is, or what we should be doing with our lives. And by the way, that's a question that people struggle with, not just when they're young, but some
Right.
people, unfortunately, through their whole lives. There's a sense of anxiety that comes along with it. More than a sense, there's full-on anxiety that comes along with it for a lot of people because they feel they should know the answer. But what about if you're in that place where you're just not sure, if you can adopt that listening attitude in reference to yourself and just engage people in conversation and learn what other people are doing and listen for those little gems of advice. You were listening. So when your teacher said to you and your professor said to you, learn the language of business, it meant something to you.
Yeah.
He's probably said that to thousands of students over the years, right? It's like most people are going, nah, I don't want to learn that language.
And by the way, I was not his best student either.
Well, yeah, I mean, I get it. You're a humble guy, but obviously, in intelligence, smartness, and all that, we measure in lots of different ways.
Sure.
And you have a level of intelligence that's very strong on the emotional intelligence side of the equation, and it led you ultimately to this place, Aristocrat Gaming. So at what point? So I'm going all the way back to the original question. At what point did you find yourself in this world?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the way it kind of worked out is I was working at Western Digital in Orange County where we lived, and WD had moved their corporate headquarters to the Bay Area, and I had commuted for 3 years, which I don't recommend to anybody. Not a sustainable lifestyle for sure. And then they finally had said, "Hey, we really want you to move to the Bay Area." And so that really, the interesting thing about it is, outside of my Deloitte job and my P&G job, when I had internships at both, it's the only other time I've applied for a job. Those are the only 2 times I've ever applied for a job. Because when WD said, "Hey, we would like you to move," I'd been getting calls from executive recruiters. But when I'm committed somewhere, I don't really return those calls, which probably is not great advice, but it's just kind of how I am. But given the optionality that, I was potentially going to have to move to the Bay, I'd gotten a call from an executive recruiter who really wanted to talk to me about this opportunity. And I remember at the time, so I finally connected with her and she was like, "It's this company, Aristocrat." I'm like, "Never heard of them." They are in gaming. I'm like, "What do you mean gaming?" And she's like, "Oh, they make, slot machines and video games and things like that." I'm like, "Oh, I'm not a big gambler." and it's in Las Vegas. And I'm like, Vegas? And everyone has this idea. When you say Vegas, it immediately triggers this neuron response and this memory. And it's fun memories when you get there, and the no fun memories when you realize you've forgotten half your stuff there.
Right. Or left or lost half your stuff there.
I was being nice. And so I was very skeptical at first, and I'd been talking to a handful of executive recruiters about other opportunities, things that fit more within my, there was a biotech opportunity I was talking to, there was another tech opportunity, and there was a San Jose, obviously I could stay at WD and move to San Jose, or this gaming company. But I said, I need to go there with an open mind. So I flew out to Vegas. I came to visit the team, and I fell in love with the business. And what I realized about the business and the people we were really a technology company that happened to make product for casinos and online. But at the fundamental core, we were a technology company. I'm not sure we exactly knew that we were a technology company, but we were. We made a piece of hardware. We made a lot of software, and we had a competitive advantage in how we did that. And I looked at this opportunity and I said, man, you talk about being able to put all your skills that you spent a big chunk of your career building to take this business to the next level. And that was incredibly appealing. And I fell in love with the people. That was the other piece of it. And, if I can give some advice to people who are listening, is you have to do what you love every day. If you do it for a paycheck, if you do it for a title, man, that lasts like 3 months. And then after 3 months, you're pretty unhappy again, and you're looking again. And so I fell in love. And then I came back to Orange County, and I was trying to figure out, how do I have my wife fall in love with the same opportunity? And so, we're both very analytical people. By the way, she was the valedictorian of her high school. I met her at Claremont McKenna. She graduated third in our class. So she was everything that I always was like, man, there's people out there.
So you applied the same philosophy. You married somebody smarter than you.
100%.
Yeah.
And then the key is, which I'm always working on, is listening. Because I will tell you, Steve, 99% of the time, she is correct.
Yeah.
I sometimes don't think it's 99% of the time, but after the fact, data would tell you it is 99% of the time. And so, we had this whole conversation about Vegas, and I said, you really just need to come see it. And Julie Cameron Doe, who was our CFO at the time, she was the hiring manager, and she did this amazing job of, instead of focusing she could have put us on the Strip in like a super fancy room. She actually brought us up to Summerlin, where the office is located. So it's a suburb of Vegas. And she showed us what family life would look like here, because she understood that was one of the key requirements. This wasn't about living by the Strip, going to shows, going to fancy restaurants. And so she did this phenomenal job of getting us, tours at the local schools here. She got us a real estate agent. She met me for coffee. We did this all in 3 days. And Leslie fell in love with it as well. And, I think sometimes a lot of people try to show you what something is or is not. And it's like, you got to almost show people what it can be for you, which is far more important, right? Because everyone has a stereotype of what Vegas is, but what can it be for you? What kind of lifestyle can it be for you and your family? And so, it was kind of, Aristocrat was fourth on the list at the time. And then post this visit, we started to get a bit serious about it. And I joined the company as the CFO of the Americas. So I was the finance person. And a business that was doing very, very well, but that I believe we could really take to the next level.
To give our listeners just a sense of Aristocrat gaming, I'll just say that if you've ever been in a casino and have ever played the machines, you have seen an Aristocrat. You've been on an Aristocrat game. So if you go to the website, and we'll put the link in the show notes, just look at all the games that you guys have. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. So how many games do you guys offer right now? Do you know what the number is?
Oh my goodness, thousands. So we've been making games, again, for over 60 years. We operate anywhere where gaming is legal. So a truly global business. That was the other part I really loved about this business, is a lot of companies will say they're global and they're like, we have an office in the US. and we have a business in Spain
and one and Canada.
In Canada. But we truly operate in everywhere where gaming is legal from a gaming perspective. And then from a digital perspective, we operate anywhere all over the world, right? Anywhere where someone has access to a phone. And so the games we make are actually in a lot of ways tailored to the jurisdiction. And to your point, if you've gone to a casino and you've played any kind of Buffalo game, that is an Aristocrat game. If you've played a game called Lightning Link or Dragon Link, that is one of those once in a generational type kind of games that invented a whole new mechanic, hold and spin. You played one of our games. And that was the other thing that's become really important for us as a business is we used to say, hey, we make great games. We're going to place them in a casino, and then we're going to let the casino operator kind of market the games and manage the casino. One of the things that we've changed, and I learned this at Procter & Gamble, and I tell this to people all the time, I'm not a genius by any stretch of the imagination. Smart people just replicate great ideas. I mean, that's the reality. Someone who tries to come in and change the world from scratch, like, it usually doesn't work. And so I've been very fortunate at working at these premier Fortune 50 companies, and all the things that we've done at Aristocrat, I've just taken from the experience I've had there. Yeah. And so I learned at P&G, you could sell a product to a consumer and form an emotional connection. So that's one of the things that we're doing from an Aristocrat perspective is we're building out the brand. So people, when you walk into a casino, instead of saying, I want to play Buffalo, which you may still say, you may say, I want to play Buffalo. We know Aristocrat makes that. So if I enjoy Buffalo, I want to go play, Cash Express, because we know that Aristocrat makes that as well. And so it's really about building the brand. And we call this, direct to player marketing, or having the player drive the demand versus just a casino operator. And it's just different things that we've done from a business perspective. Again, nothing that we invented, everything we just took from other places that have really led to success in the business.
But applying it in the gaming industry, was that different?
It's different from the standpoint of it's a highly regulated industry.
Right.
And so more regulated than any other industry I've ever worked in. I worked in pharma, which is very regulated as well. So yeah, you have to make sure you understand the rules and regulations, because if not, you obviously can get into a lot of trouble. And one of the things that's one of our core principles at the company is this concept of responsible gameplay, or we call it RG, which is we are in the entertainment technology business. We do not want people to abuse that, right? And so we spend quite a bit of money and resources around this concept of responsible gameplay, because at the end of the day, I tell people, I was watching, I'm a huge Warriors fan, and I was watching the Warriors win, and there was this clip of Steph Curry when he first entered the league, and they asked him, hey, what do you want to be? What do you want your legacy to be? And he's like, I want to be a good player. I want to be a good teammate, and I want to win, but I want to win the right way, which I think a lot of people forget. I tell it to my team all the time. We're in the business of winning. We want to win, but you want to win in the right way. Because when you go home, when you talk to your kids, when you're walking your dogs, when you're doing any other aspect of your life, you want to feel good about what you did. You don't want to feel bad. And so that element, this winning and winning in the right way, is really what drove kind of this concept of love. And so, it's something we've always had a great culture at Aristocrat, but through COVID, it changed our culture, because we came up with this mantra: our people, our customers, our business. And it was a mantra that when you kind of read it back now, it's like, of course, it's a no-brainer. Everyone says, our customers, a lot of people say our customers are number one. But we really redefined that and said our people are number one, our customers are number two, and the business is number three. And that very simple concept, which, by the way, came up in a very terrifying part of our history. If you think of our business at the time when COVID hit, on the gaming side of the business, revenue went to zero overnight. I think it's outside of bankruptcy. Even in bankruptcy, you're usually making some money. Very rare for the business to go from a very robust business to zero.
Yeah. So I want to explore that chapter here in a second, but just to back up for a moment, are people, customers, business. That to you is doing business, quote, the right way, right? So was that articulated before you took over the position of CEO, or did that come about once you were in that position?
We had a core value of good business, good citizen. That has been a core value of ours for a long time.
Right.
So the company has always believed in that. But this concept of love, right, which kind of started with our people, our customers, our business, we had not articulated that before. And we had definitely not articulated that before in that order.
So how did it come about?
It came about as COVID was with us, and we had to basically make a decision very quickly that everyone went remote work.
So was that pre-COVID or after COVID or during COVID?
During COVID. It was
that's when you articulated that for the first time.
Yes.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. So everyone was leaving the building to go work from home. And we basically said, and you'll hear me talk a lot about things. I feel like human beings can only process 3 things at a time. So everything we ever do is 3 things. Like any more than 3 things, they leave that for a textbook. And we said, okay, we have to evaluate what the business impact is. We have to figure out what are the decisions we have to make. And then the most important thing, which I really believe differentiated, is we need to figure out what we're going to do in the recovery. Most businesses, as COVID was happening, focused on, we need to evaluate the impact of the business. We need to figure out the decisions we need to make. And they stopped there.
Yeah.
Stopped there because no one knew what the future held. But, I've been through some economic shocks, as all of us have. And one of the things that I learned, and it stuck with me, is companies that invest through an economic downturn, companies that believe in the future of the business, usually gain significant share through that period of time. And it's hard for people to see because everyone's a little bit in chaos and panic mode. And those are the companies that leapfrog competitors. So we spent the vast majority of our time, figuring out what would a recovery look like and what are the actions we would put in place to make sure we were prepared for the recovery. And that's what led to this principle: our people, our customers, our business. Because we realized, hey, we're going to have to make some short-term decisions here. Just like every business, we had a small layoff, we had furloughs, we had pay cuts, but we're going to do it the right way. We're going to communicate that. We're going to over communicate that. We did things like we developed an app that we use for trade shows to be able to communicate to employees that were furloughed so they could still get news. And we pushed news to them every single day. We gave them a huge heads up before we had to furlough them. And then one of the magical things we did is we were having this debate around our service techs. Our service techs are the ones that go install machines, repair machines, move machines. The most important external facing role, more even than a salesperson, right? Because they're there at a casino every single day. And as you can imagine, as casinos were shut, we had to furlough a big portion of our service techs.
Right.
And when we were having this conversation internally, okay, so let's say a casino opens up, how much time is it going to take for us to unfurlough someone? And we had some internal meetings and they said 2 weeks. 2 weeks? What's happening in 2 weeks? And it was like, well, we're going to collect their badge. We're going to collect their computers. We're going to collect the vans. We're going to collect all the equipment. We have to shut down payroll. We have to do all these things. And I said, why? They're our employees. They're like, yeah, well, they're furloughed. So technically they're not our employees during that period of time. And I said, they're still our employees. How can we do this in less than 4 hours? They're like, 4 hours? Are you insane? Just told you 2 weeks. And I said, what if we let them keep their badges? What if we let them keep their trucks? What if we let them keep their equipment? What if we don't shut down email access? What if the only thing we shut down is payroll? That's it, because we continue to pay for health benefits.
Right.
The other decision we made as a business. And they were like, well, there's a lot of legal liability to that. And I was like, well, tell me about that. Well, if they drive the truck and get into an accident, if they log onto their computer and we're not paying them. And I said, we hired these people, right? Yeah, we hired these people. Did we trust these people? Yeah, we trust these people. Then that's what we're going to do. And they literally looked, I mean, again, it's not a complex idea. They looked at me like I was insane. And that's what we did.
Who is the they? Who's the they that you're talking about? Internally? Just
yeah,
internal stuff? Okay.
Yeah, internal, yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to ask you to name names. I'm just
good.
This is not like outside counsel This was like within
Both though, right? Both,
both.
because
Okay.
you're obviously getting outside counsel opinions
Sure.
as well. And if you think about these small moments, I talked about these small pivotal moments, right? Whether it was showing up to school not knowing the language, whether it was taking 3 buses, whether it's the accounting is the language of business. That single decision that we made had massive implications, and here's why. Number one, we communicated that to our team, and we were very transparent about this is the liability that we are assuming if you drive the truck and get into an accident. So didn't leave it up for chance. We said this is a liability. Number two, we trust you. We trust that you're gonna do the right thing. Number three, as this COVID event unfolds, and we'll see what happens. The second we see first signs of life, we're gonna turn you back on. And by the way, we left you all the equipment. So when you think about what the feeling is of someone that's getting furloughed and you go and take all the equipment back.
Yeah.
There's this feeling of loss and this feeling of, I may never get this back. We left it all there. And then when we saw signs of life, here's the interesting thing: about a quarter of our service techs never actually got furloughed because we gave them such a big heads up what was happening. We kept paying them that there was a furlough date that started. Casinos started to open up before that date.
Uh-huh.
And within 30 minutes, not 4 hours, within 30 minutes, payroll could switch them back on. They can get into their truck. They had their badge. They had their email access. We were the first to mobilize to a casino. But remember, we wanted to win. We wanted to win the right way. We moved competitor products. So we could have said, hey, none of our competitors did this. They're 2 weeks out. We said, no, you know what? At the end of the day, this is a partnership. It's a long-term strategic partnership. So we're going to help you move competitor products because we have the physical manpower to do that. And that's what we did.
When you say move products, what do you mean in that? You mean physically move products?
Yeah, because at the time, because a lot of casinos had to redo their layout because of social distancing.
Okay.
So they had to move either, from long rows of slot machines to circular pots to create spacing, or they had to move literally slot machines 6 feet apart to create spacing.
Okay, so just to be super clear about this, you guys, because of the trust that you extended to your team, you left everything in place other than the payroll. Because you did that, as soon as the casinos opened up again, you guys were there. Your competitors did not do things the same way, so they weren't there because they had to get their trucks back to their people. They had to get the equipment, the badges, et cetera, back to their folks. And therefore, you were in the casino when your competitors were not, but all of the machines had to be moved. And you guys could have said at that point, yeah, but that's not our machine. We'll move ours. You casino people, that's your problem. But you didn't do that. You said, you casino people are our partners. It doesn't matter who made the machines. We're here. So we're going to help you move them.
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
And internally, when we were having this discussion, they're like, what are you going to ask in return for that? Nothing. Like, nothing. This is a long-term strategic partnership. We're going to ask for nothing. And they're like, is that, they looked at me like, are you really a finance person? Because this, this goes against all core principles and values. And it's nothing. We asked for nothing. In fact, we launched an Aristocrat Assist program that also had other benefits to help casinos get up and running. And so we actually got to a casino before it even opened. So they would tell us, hey, we're going to open in 2 to 3 weeks. We would get there that day before. And so they hadn't even unfurloughed their own people. And so in a lot of instances, we were the first ones on the casino floor.
Including their people.
Wow. And guess what happens when the service tech showed up?
What?
They were so thankful of how we had treated them, of the transparency, of the trust, of the love that we had shown them. They showed our customers that right back.
Yeah.
And we have all these amazing pictures, and I always remember this for my entire career, where there'd be pictures of our machines, and there'd be a competitor machine in between our two machines. Our two machines would be turned on, the competitor machine was turned off. They were using our competitor machines to social distance our machines. And that's a magical moment. Because in the moment, as you're making these decisions, what people don't realize, it's not like we had thought through, this is 3 years later, this is what we want the outcome to be. You just have to go back to your core principles, to your core values, and do what you believe is right. And then the story gets written. You don't get to write the story along the journey, right? The story gets written post those decisions.
There's an old saying, it's been attributed to many different people over the years. So I don't know who originally said it, but it's adversity doesn't build character, it reveals it. What happened when your business went to zero, the early days of COVID, it revealed to you who you guys really are, what's really important, our people, our customers, our business. And then you acted on that basis, as opposed to some of your aforementioned competitors, but also, we saw it in all kinds of industries.
Yeah.
It's, it wasn't, what do we need to do now to prepare for the recovery? It was, what do we need to do to survive today? Which is not a terrible question, but it becomes something of terrible consequence when, in that moment, the values that you have said are important go right out the window because suddenly it's inconvenient, or it doesn't make sense on the balance sheet in the traditional way, like you just said. So what a great illustration of going back to that groundedness. It's funny, I haven't thought about this for a while, but I remember in the early days, back in the early days of the COVID, that's the way we're going to be talking about it when we're 90 years old. Yeah, back in the days of the COVID. I remember telling people in my talks and virtual stuff that I was doing, that this is temporary. You got to remember, this is temporary. We don't know when it's going to pass, but it will pass. So now more than ever, we've got to be focusing on what kind of future we want to create. What do we want the future to be like? And let's start working on that now. And the way you approached that was getting it right down to the tactical side of that question as well, which is absolutely brilliant. So the culture then at Aristocrat Gaming is, it's a personal thing to you. And you've used the word love several times, but that word doesn't necessarily show up in your kind of company communication and language, or does it?
It does now. It actually does now.
What does that look like?
So one of the things that, and this is kind of how I came across the book, is in the middle of COVID, one of the things we realized was communication was a huge challenge, because you did have a lot of furloughed people, and there was just a lot of uncertainty and a lot of anxiety, as you can imagine. And by the way, we all felt that. It's not like any of us didn't feel that. But we started doing these things called office hours or coffee chats, where it was a 1 hour with me and the team. And, I would usually have like a guest, and it was really just about downloading information, no script, no slides, open-ended. And I remember the early days of that, you'd get a handful of people, and then like all of a sudden there was hundreds and hundreds of people that were showing up for these things. And, no script for an hour to fill that is kind of daunting. And we started having these very honest conversations about the struggles, the challenges, the uncertainty. And we started talking about, how we cared for each other, how we all felt the same way. We had all, to a large degree, taken pay cuts. We were all in a very similar situation. And I remember this woman, Sandy, who works for us, sent me an email and said, "Hey, by the way, I've read this book, and everything that we're doing at Aristocrat just reminds me so much about the book. And I've shared this with you. I'm not a huge business book reader, but I have read this book now. And so I was like, great. And so I actually ordered it and I read it. And as I was reading it, it's having these aha moments like, holy shit, like these are the things that we have done. And without reading the book, right? Like these are just embedded in who we are and what we care about. One of the things I love about the book is, love is just damn good business, which I fully buy into because it really goes into this concept of our people, our customers, our business. But the subheading, I think, is equally as powerful. Do what you love in the service of people who love what you do. So we use this language of love now. We talk about love. We sometimes will say, I love you in a work appropriate way.
Yeah.
You always have to be, mindful of that. But it's more the feeling, the emotion than even the words, because it's really easy to say you love something or you love someone. I love coffee, but it's the feeling, it's the actions, it's the things that you do when no one's looking. It's the things that you do when decisions are hard. And one of the things that we have found is we haven't compromised that order of decision making. Every decision that we've had to make since the start of COVID, we've used our people, our customers, our business. In fact, we've told investors that. We've told our customers that. Like I've gone out and told our customers, you're number two, you're not number one. And they're like, what? Like, no, our people are number one. Because if our people aren't number one, they won't treat you in that same way. And therefore, it doesn't matter if you're my number one. I don't see you that often. And it's an interesting phenomenon that has happened. And so, I've talked to other CEOs that run casinos, and I've sent them the book. And it's this magical thing that people are like, yeah, and here's why. And I was walking into the building this morning, and I have this feeling every single time I walk into the building. I always think, I am such a fortunate human being that I get to walk into these buildings, beautiful buildings, that I get to be part of this team, that I love what I do for a living, and that there's people here that love me. No amount of money, no amount of prestige, no title, none of that can ever make up for that. And it kind of goes back to that concept you were saying, where a lot of times people are always searching for what they want to do or don't know. It's because they haven't fallen in love with anything yet. And I think that's a big issue with social media today, is you're constantly reading this fictitious, overly dramatized happiness that everyone else is living. And as you're reading it, you're like, well, I'm not that happy. I wish I looked better in a swimsuit. I wish that I had a nicer car. And it's this whole I wish I had, that's in a lot of ways ruining everyone's experience, because you should love what you have today. You should love the experiences you get to do today. And it's not something I've known my entire life, by the way. It's something as I've gotten older and my kids have gotten older and I've had more time to reflect. The journey is far more important than the destination. If you can't wake up every single day, or at least the vast majority of days, and look forward into going to work, if you dread it, and I always say, if 40% of the days you dread going to work, you need a new gig. And I encourage people, even in our organization, if that's how you feel, you need a new gig. Not because I want you to leave, but because you're not showing up as the best version of yourself. And you won't show up as the best version of yourself until you really feel that love, that energy, that passion, and showing up, in these four walls, and showing up not for yourself, but showing up for everybody else around you that's depending on you.
You've made it part of your practice as a leader to maintain personal contact with essentially all 4,000 employees, right? Because you've been able to do it virtually with your fireside chats and your town halls and all of that. So how concerned are you, if at all, that the culture, this love-based culture at Aristocrat Gaming is dependent on you as a personality, and how much of it has become systemic in the way you guys work? Is that a concern for you at all?
Absolutely. It is always a concern, because I think it's this magical thing we have discovered. It's what's differentiated us, and quite frankly, it's what driven like insane business results. And I do
Can you share, by the way, can you share what some of those results have been?
Sure. So we just disclosed earnings. We're Australianly publicly traded, so we disclose earnings twice a year. And so we get the benefit of seeing what our competitors do on a quarterly basis, and we don't have to disclose those earnings for 6 months. So for the half, we had the largest half in gaming ever. Think about that. A little bit over 2 years removed from COVID, where a lot of people said the world was going to come to an end, where a lot of people said everything was going to move digitally, and the physical casino was maybe not going to exist.
And by the way, when your business went to zero.
When our business went to zero, we delivered the largest half we have ever delivered at the company. We have gained more share in the last 2+ years than we ever had in that short period of time. And we almost spend no time talking about it. Because, to answer your first question, the people and customer element of it, that love, that magical thing we have discovered, is the precious, fragile thing we worry about. The business results, and look, we all have headaches. We all have to deal with lots of fun things from a business perspective. we spend very little time talking about numbers, almost none. We look at what the results are for month end. We do a little bit of analysis. We're like, okay, we keep talking to our customers because our customers will tell us more than what the numbers say. And one of the things that we've been working really hard lately is how do we ingrain this love into the culture? And the reality is, great leaders leave the place better than they found the place. A poor leader is someone that makes something great and then leaves and it falls apart. And if you were going to ask me what keeps me up at night, that is the one thing that keeps me up at night, is making sure that one day when I retire or I go do something else, that this place is better than when I started, and it sustains. Right. And so it is something I think a lot of leaders don't spend a lot of time thinking about. So the very day that I got promoted into this role, one of my first thoughts was, who's going to succeed me in this role? That's usually not what you think the very first day. In fact, a lot of leaders go into protect mode, into saying, hey, I have this job now, I need to protect it from everybody else that's trying to get it. I buy into the philosophy of creating a sustainable business with succession planning. And what you really want to do ultimately is you want to work yourself out of a job. That's been my experience my whole career. Work yourself out of the job.
And make sure that, to the best you can, that whatever worked for you while you were there has become part of the DNA of the organization. As that the culture is, I mean, every place has a culture, right?
Right.
Whether you pay attention to it or not. You guys have built an intentional culture, and it's it will be part of your legacy or not.
Right.
Right. So to make sure that it's part of your legacy, and I wish every leader thought about this, because where this question comes from, Hector, is, let's just say, more than once in my several decades of doing this work, I've seen incredible cultures get created around a particular leader, and then that leader leaves, and literally overnight, I've seen it crash and burn. And the main reason that it happens is because, like you said, that leader did not think through that eventuality.
Right.
And ironically, because they were great leaders, because they created that culture, but in retrospect, perhaps a little too ego driven.
That's right.
It's about look how great I am. I'm a great leader. Look at this great culture I've created. Okay, see you later. You're on your own. And crash and burn. That's the sound of crashing and burning.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not a sound effects guy, but
you should try again.
I'll save it. I'll rehearse a little bit first. So that's a great perspective for all of us. I love that that you, through the thread that kind of runs through your whole story from when you were that young, immigrant student who didn't speak the language to today. The thread that runs through all of that to me is that curiosity about the world around you, the willingness to hear perspectives from other people and incorporate that into who you are, even and especially in the context of a worldwide challenge known as COVID. It brought about that reflection.
Right.
And if that was the kind of the natural response that most of us had to any scenario, any challenging scenario, is to reflect on it and ask, what can I learn from this? And what does this reveal to me? And how can this help me be a better version of myself? How can it help us be a better version of this company? Then we'd all be in a lot better shape, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. I think if more people bought into this concept of love, right, and really accepting who you are and who you're not, right? I was never going to be the valedictorian. To your point, I just married her. I think it would make life a lot easier because people would stop chasing what they don't have, and they would appreciate what they do have. And if there's something they didn't have that they wanted, then they could create a pathway to work towards that versus saying, I want that tomorrow.
Right. Yeah. I think where I'd like to, I'll bring this in for a landing here in a second. The one thing that I would encourage you to do is think about your language just a little bit, because you've several times referred to this as the concept of love. And what you've demonstrated is that this is not a concept to you. This is a practice.
Sure.
And so your examples about what how you dealt with the furloughs and the kind of communication that you guys have, that's not conceptual. That's observable. Observable is a hard word to say.
Even for the valedictorians.
Yeah, that's right. I was not a valedictorian either, just for the record. But what an inspiring example of how love is a practice and not a concept through what you're doing there. And it's a real pleasure. It's a pleasure to know you. I'm just so excited to share your story with the world. Just one last thing I'm going to ask you to talk about, sure, just a couple minutes worth, is your idea of the next 12 hours.
Yes. So Steve and I have been talking about this concept that I've been considering, maybe in retirement, although Steve encouraged me to do it every day, of writing a book. And I'm a big believer of this concept of the next 12 hours, which is when you go home, what your personal life is, what your family life is, how you feel, that either drains your cup or it fills your cup. And I think a lot of corporations don't do a lot of investigating or ask any questions, right? Like there's this reticence to ask any personal questions about your personal life. But what I have found in my career is the greatest determination of success of an individual is if you can figure out what their next 12 hours look like. And do they go home? Are they happy? And therefore, when they wake up in the morning, do they show up happy? Do they show up full of love because they got a lot of love back at home? And so I really think, and hasn't really been a lot written about that, the next 12 hours and how you would judge executive performance and executive success. And, as I told Steve, when I retire, I'm going to write this book, although he keeps telling me to start it today. And
you're talking about me like I'm not here.
I know. And, from my personal experience, I have been very fortunate that I married the valedictorian. We didn't spend a lot of time talking about this, but the single most important thing to me in my life is not my title, it's not my pay, it's not the success or failures. It's the fact that I've been married to my wife for 21 years. And the biggest legacy thing I'd like to leave behind is, and hopefully I live into my 80s and maybe 90s, is the fact that I'll stay married to my wife for 50 plus years. Because that's a testament to good times, bad times, ups and downs, moves. She moved to Vegas. And so this next concept of the next 12 hours, maybe in like 20 years, Steve, that book will get written.
But the idea behind it is that we should be paying attention to the whole human being, not just who they are when they show up at work and when they leave work, and then that's the end of that. But to give them inspiration and guidance and help in the next 12 hours.
That's
when
right.
when we don't see them and they're with their families, and to treat people as the truth of who they are, which is a human being, not somebody that is segmented into the work person and the personal life person. And we play different roles, we do different things, certainly, but we're literally the same human being with the same DNA and the same emotions and everything else. And if I'm drained in one place, I'm going to be drained in the other, and vice versa. So I just think it's a beautiful perspective. And so as we bring this in for a landing, Hector, what's a good way for people to reach out to you if they want to learn more about you, about the company, if they're looking for a new career, perhaps?
I think the best way is through LinkedIn. So I'm on LinkedIn. It's the only social media that I'm actually on. And if you Googled Hector Fernandez, that would crash the internet. But if you add Aristocrat,
there's more than one Hector Fernandez?
There is, yeah.
No kidding.
If you do Hector Fernandez Aristocrat, usually one of the first things that'll pop up is my LinkedIn profile. So feel free to add me and to reach out.
Cool. And I'll put your profile link in the notes as well as the company website. Well, thank you for sharing this amazing story with us, Hector. And you're going to give a lot of inspiration to a lot of people. And personally, I appreciate it as well. And I appreciate it. It's a pleasure getting to know you, and I'm looking forward to more.
You as well, Steve. I appreciate the opportunity.
And folks, thanks for tuning in. Until next time, as Hector would say, and me too, do what you love in the service of people who love what you do. See you next time.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Love is Just Damn Good Business with Steve Farber. Join us again next time, because when customer and employee satisfaction just isn't enough anymore, we are here to back you up with specific ideas to operationalize love to make an enormous difference in your business, personal life, and the world around you. Visit our website at stevefarber.com to leave a review. And don't forget to share the love with your colleagues and friends, because after all, it's just damn good business.